let's get to our special guest. I won't give a big introduction. We'll talk all about it, but let's go to him. Big Paul Hefti standing by. How you doing, Paul?
Well, here I am, Larry. Great to be with you.
Yeah, great to see you there, Paul. Paul, you look great. Now, we're going to get into, I do want to tell a little bit about how we first met and everything. But, before we do,
Sure.
Paul, your father, of course, was a very famous composer, arranger, the great legendary Neal Hefti. I have to ask you, what was that like growing up in a household like that where your dad was hanging around with the likes of Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra?
Well, it was a wonderland. And you also have to understand that in our house, we didn't have Tony Bennett and Gloria Gaynor and people like that floating around. It was my sister and my mother and and all of New York City. I was a kid growing up in a wonderful musical environment, and you couldn't beat it.
Yeah, well,
there's so much to say about it, and we'll touch on it as we go along. But it would be as you expect. It was amazing.
So, in any case, with Paul, with Neal, Neal, a lot of people today don't really know exactly who Neal Hefti is. Of course, there's a lot of people who do. In my day, of course, I'm of that age. I'm in my 60s. I certainly remember Neal Hefti. I thought it would be a good idea, Ronnie, if we show some of his albums. And I'd like to hear, Paul, I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about your dad and the influence he had on you. And we're going to talk a lot about Hefti Plays Hefti and why you're spreading, continuing his legacy. But talk a little bit about your dad, if you would, please.
Well, sure. Neal would come home with albums constantly, about 2 or 3 times a year, maybe even more. He did a lot of work in New York, which is where I was born, and the music was amazing. Great things would happen. I think I'd be running around the house and trying to keep the energy high, and it wasn't hard. And the music was so good. It was so beautiful. And it just kept on coming and kept on coming, and every new record he brought home was another gem. I can see Barefoot in the Park right now, up there.
Mm-hmm.
And there, wow, I'm stumbling for words right now, but
it's okay.
It was fantastic.
Paul,
and the greatest thing that I noticed was the respect that he had from people in the industry or the mailman or what have you. That when they found out that my dad was Neal Hefti, they'd just look at me and say, "Oh my goodness gracious, isn't that something great?" And they'd reel off a couple of tunes of his, and it was hot stuff in New York. And all the great times continued when we came to Los Angeles in 1960. And there you go.
One thing,
anything specific you want to know?
No, that's great.
Let me know,
that's great, Paul.
I'll talk about it.
No, that's great, Paul. What I'd like to know is, of course, I didn't meet you until you were about 16 years old, but I'm curious, like, when did you get started with instruments? What was it, the piano? I would think you'd start on the piano, the guitar. I mean, what age did you put an instrument in your hand, or did you pick something up?
Well, we had instruments all over the house. We had a grand piano and a couple of trumpets and this and that. And I think that I first played the piano. I was allowed to play anything I wanted to play. There were no restrictions. Both of my parents were jazz musicians. Mom was a singer. They met each other in the Woody Herman Orchestra. And so it was an all-music house.
Yeah.
And nobody really minded, no matter what time of the day or night. I could jump on any instrument and play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I guess the piano was first, and then there was the flute. And Dad didn't put anything in my hands. He tried to keep his distance and have us gravitate towards music if we wanted to. There was certainly no plan to have us follow in his footsteps, but my sister and I both did.
Sure. I'm going to tell that little story, Paul. When I met you, I was a very young kid. I was 14 years old, and they skipped me ahead into the 10th grade at Birmingham. They had that go ahead, stay back thing, and I took a test, and lo and behold, they put me ahead, and I all of a sudden I'm trying out for the orchestra and with 18-year-olds, and I didn't think I was very good on the trumpet. I'd been playing for 4 years, and they had the auditions, and of course you may remember, I'm sure you remember our orchestra at Birmingham. Birmingham was known for our music department. And they had 20 trumpet players in the orchestra. Kids came from all over the city to play in our music program, and they had 4 first trumpets, 8 seconds, and 8 thirds, and I didn't think I was going to make it, and I looked on the sheet, and he had me down as a first trumpet, 4th chair first trumpet, and I went up to Mr. Price, and I said, "Is this a mistake? I was in a 3rd trumpet." He said, "Well, your upper register was very strong." And it was true. I had a very tight armature, and I could hit a high C with no problems, and I had a strong upper register, but I really was not very good at reading music. So I was under pressure, and I was scared, and you were the first chair first trumpet. And, we'd have to play our parts individually, and I really had trouble and struggle, and you would actually play the parts for me. You would say, "Larry, it goes like this," and you would play it for me. And that helped me so much, and because once you hear it, you can play it. And, you just helped me out so much. And then the band rehearsals were at 7 o'clock in the morning, of course. And I didn't drive. I was 14 years old. And you said, "Well, I'll come and get you." And you actually drove like 8 miles out of your way to come and get me every morning at 6:30 for band rehearsal. And I'm a little 14-year-old kid. It was unbelievable. And then I remember, like in the first week that I met you, one day I had no friends in Birmingham. All my friends were back in junior high. I went over to the music room during lunchtime, and I heard some incredible guitar playing coming out of the music room, and it was just shredding lead, electric guitar. And I go in the music room, and you're in the corner, and you're just jamming away on the guitar, and I'm in shock. I didn't know you played guitar, and I said, "Paul, I didn't know you played guitar too." You said, "Oh yeah, I've been playing guitar forever. I just picked up the trumpet 6 months ago." And I was like shocked, and I sat down at the piano, and I hit a key, and you said, F sharp. I hit another key, B flat, A. You just start calling out the notes. I mean, I couldn't even believe it. And then you came over and sat down at the piano, and you just started just playing the piano, like incredible. And I said, this guy's unbelievable. I've never seen a talent like this in my life. And that's when I realized, your dad being a famous composer, it's in the blood, and you had a gift, and you do have a gift. And I said, that's it. And after that semester, I quit the trumpet forever because I knew I didn't have that gift, Paul. But what you did for me that year when I was there without my friends in junior high was amazing. I was just really too young to be in high school. But do you remember those days at all, Paul?
Oh, never forgotten those days. They're firmly imprinted in my mind. There's nothing like having the keys to the music room, which is what Mr. Price gave me. And of course, I would leave class, and if I didn't feel like being in geometry or biology or what have you, and I'd go hang out in the music room and play piano or grab a tuba and goof off. Whatever instrument I could get my hands on, I'd rather be doing that. And that's all I did as a kid, besides being a kid and goofing off and racing slot cars and stuff like that. But I played music all the time. And so it was a little unfair, Larry. Most people were well balanced. I mean, you were probably planning on a future of some sort, and you had to be well schooled and know how to talk to people. Well, I decided I didn't have to do anything but music, and that's all I did. And I remember picking you up for orchestra, and it's really something to put that cold mouthpiece up to your lips at 7 in the morning and start playing. But it was wonderful. Every moment of high school music was really incredible. A lot of funny things happened in band. I recommend everybody to get a nice band education, to play a band instrument, just so that they can enjoy the crazy stuff that happens in the band room in high school. And you and I were both there. I don't know how much of Mr. Price you caught, but he was one of the funniest teachers I've ever been around. And the band was quite unruly. And we tortured him to a degree. Of course, we torture all teachers when we're kids. But there's something about being a musician in high school and what you can do when you've got something in your hand that can make a very loud noise. and you're 15, 16, 17 years old. Well, you can understand how the trumpet players and the drummers were close friends because we had the most damaging instruments to the calm of the room that you could imagine. And you know, everybody kind of laughed at what we did. And so we were encouraged just by our friends to keep on doing this kind of stuff. And
you know, Paul, all of that you
time
just
in my life. And when high school ended, I joined a disco group and went out on the road. And the fun continued. I don't know what happened to you directly after high school, but it was fun while it lasted, Larry. It really was.
Paul,
And you know, actually, Larry, I'd love to see a picture of you when you were 14. That would bring everything back to me.
Well,
right
you
now.
you know
I see you right now, and I haven't seen you for about 45 years.
All right. Well,
or so.
listen. First of all,
you don't have a. You didn't bring a picture with you, did you?
Well, but wait. Hold it. Okay. First, I will tell you this. I found a picture of you a year later. Okay, your high school senior picture. Okay. I don't know when the last time you saw this picture was, but we'll have it here in a second here. Can you find that, Ronnie?
Oh, good. Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. There we go. This was you in the 12th grade. Now, again, this was because after I quit the trumpet that year, you and I really didn't. In fact, until this show, we hadn't spoken in 47 years. We had not spoken in 47 years, folks, and this guy is such a prince. You took care of me back then, Paul. You looked after me. I mean, you were so nice to me. I can't even tell you what that friendship meant to me. I mean, we weren't friends outside of the music room. I know that. You had your other people. But in the music room, you know, you made me feel like $1 million because, like I said, I was only 14. I shouldn't have been in the 10th grade. I should have been in the 9th grade. They skipped me ahead, and, you know, it was rough for me. All my friends were in junior high. And to have, you know, you there, you know, an older guy, and, I mean, you know, picking me up for school and telling me how to play my trumpet parts and all that stuff. But this was, I couldn't find that year, but I did find this one from your senior year. And then from that same book, I actually had a friend up in Northern California, Scott Paris, who was able to get these pictures for me. And he found my picture a year behind you in the 11th grade, and that's me in the 11th grade. Now, I honestly don't remember wearing my hair like this, Paul.
Look at that hair.
Ronnie, can we get a side-by-side? Let me see here. Hold on, guys.
So we had the nerve to actually show up in school with faces like that. Well, there's a nice side-by-side.
Yeah. Hey, come on now. We haven't done this in a while. We got some bugs to work out here. I don't remember. Yes. I don't even remember wearing my hair that way. But as you can see, you had long hair. I had kind of long hair. That was kind of the way of the day, which brings me to another interesting question, Paul. Or interesting thought. You know, back in those days, we're talking about 1969, 1970, right? Uh-huh. And in those days, you know, the popular acts of the day were, you know, Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones, and even earlier than that, you can go back to the Beatles and the Beach Boys and all that. And all my friends were into that. And, you know, I mean, I eventually, of course, I was into Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin and all these bands that all my friends were into. But I was also really into, you know, Herb Alpert. That's what made me want to play the trumpet. My trumpet teacher quickly flipped me over to Chet Baker. I'm still a big Chet Baker fan to this day. My mom's favorite was Judy Garland. We'd sit around, you know, watching Judy Garland. And, of course, my dad's favorite was Nat King Cole. And so I grew up listening to that kind of music. And to this day, that's the music I gravitate towards. So it almost seems like I'm out of place from my generation. But now I look at the music you're playing today with your new band, and we're going to show some videos and we're going to show some pictures, and you're going to let you tell us all about it. But you were, you know, kind of into that music as well. Did you ever get into the rock of the day and those big rock bands back in those days too?
Oh, absolutely. I had nothing but top 40 records. And I was pumping them moment to moment through my 8-track player in my car at peak volume. I cut 13 speakers into my Maverick. Because the car was made out of plastic. I could do it with a butter knife, as I remember. And I put all these speakers in the car, and Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, all the Beatles, all of the Simon and Garfunkel, all of the great stuff from Herb Alpert, absolutely anything on the top 40. And Larry, if you remember, as we all do, anybody who was coming of age in the 60s, that the top 40 was quite an eclectic mix of classical, hard rock, folk, poppy kind of nice stuff. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys. It's a great decade for music. And to say that I was into jazz because of the force feeding I got by just living in my house, but I was looking to the modern days, and that's why I was playing guitar. And the reason I was in the band to begin with, and how we met, or the reason that we met, is because when I was about ready to go to high school, my father just kind of sat down with me and said, you know, Paul, there's a war going on here, the Vietnam War. And he said, if you don't want to, carry a gun, and you don't look like the type of guy who really wants to carry a gun and go fight in the war, if you get really, really good in a band, on a band instrument, I can get you a tryout with the Army Band or wherever you happen to be drafted, because Neal knew the directors of the Army Band, the Air Force Band, the Marine Band, and I said, this is a pretty good idea, thanks. And he said, just pick any band, any instrument that would be in a marching band. And I said, well, we've got trumpets all over the house, so let's play trumpet. And he dug this King cornet out of the closet, and it was like from 1910. This old, rusted up, I'm not going to call it a piece of junk, but it didn't look sleek like a normal modern trumpet. And he took it to the fix-it shop, and they took out all the dents, and they made everything work. And I showed up for school in 1968 on the first day of the 10th grade with 4 weeks of trumpet lessons and a cornet, a shiny cornet. And man, I keep going back to the fun that we had in band. And I was a pretty serious guy when I got into high school. And the band was pretty goofy. And I remember kind of getting mad at some of the people at the first rehearsal. And I would look back at them and say, like, hey, quit screwing around back there, right? Within 2 weeks, I had completely joined the pack, and we were having the time of our lives. But that's why you'd find me in the music room jamming on guitar, because I never gave up my love for guitar or singing, but I realized that I had to go whole hog on this trumpet thing, and I was all in on it, and I really didn't want to get in trouble with the war or anything of the sort, and I didn't think I'd be a very good soldier. So I took it very seriously, and on the day that my draft number came up very high, which was good. It was a high number, and they were only drafting up to about number 50 that year, and my draft number was in the 240s. I just relaxed, and I went back to playing guitar, and hence, after school, joining a disco band as a guitar player instead of a symphony as a trumpet player. So it was a very short-lived time playing the trumpet, but I loved it so much. And I'll never forget it. I wish I still had that trumpet, but I don't. And there we go, and that brings us up to modern day. But to answer your question, and I think I did, I was completely into the top 40. And the music that was to come, rather than the music that had already been written. I was looking forward to what the future would bring.